Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Boob Talk with your host, Cynthia Rogers. It's time to get it off our chest as we discuss the issues breast cancer and other cancer survivors face. Come along on our journey. We are survivors. Welcome to Boob Talk. I'm your host, Cynthia Rogers. Thank you for joining me this evening. Tonight, we are going to discuss what I think doesn't really get talked about enough, maybe because we don't really know much about it. Does density matter? Our special guest tonight to help us uncover information about this topic is breast cancer survivor Leslie Ferris Yerger. She's an author, speaker, and founder of My Density Matters. Leslie, welcome to Boob Talk.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today.
Glad you could be with us.
Me too.
This is going to be an exciting topic. So let's just get things started. And can you explain to us what exactly is breast density?
You bet. And, sometimes it's just easier to have somebody who's not a doctor and doesn't use the doctor talk to explain it. So that's me. So what?
Break it down, Leslie.
Is, break it down. No doctor talk. So our breasts are really made up of two things. One is fat, fibroglandular tissue, and in that would be included our ducts, the lobules, all those things that are in our breasts for what our breasts are really for in the first place, and that is the production of milk. So kind of easily explained, the ratio of fat to not fat, which is fibroglandular tissue, makes up our density, and that's really what it is.
Well, now when you say that, it really does make sense.
It's a pretty simple concept, but
that?
Sometimes it gets talked about in, really, unfamiliar language. So that's the way I like to explain it. And when I do it that way, people are like, "Oh, okay, I get that."
Yeah, right? It makes sense.
Yeah.
So now that you've explained it, and it seems pretty straightforward, should we be concerned about breast density?
Absolutely. Every woman should be concerned. Everyone with breasts should know their breast density. Not much different than we should know our pressure, our cholesterol level, all of those sort of health meters, if you will, or measures. We really all should know our density, and that's really for two reasons. And the first reason is that the more dense we are, the less mammograms work for us. And there's a simple explanation for that. So a mammogram is really just another word for more or less an X-ray. And so on a mammogram, our fat looks black. Our density looks white. And cancer also looks white. So the more density that we have, the more the cancer can be masked by the density in a mammogram image. So that's one reason why we should be concerned about our density. But really, the kicker, I say, the whole kind of bummer about that is that the more dense we are, the higher our likelihood of getting breast cancer in the first place. Our risk goes up. The higher the density, the higher the risk. So it's kind of a double whammy, if you will, because our current standard of care is mammograms, and the more dense we are, so the higher the risk, the less well they work. That's a concern. So that's why we all should know what our density is, so that we can understand that. And if we are dense, talk to our doctors about additional screening.
So, Leslie, how do we even know if we have dense breasts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's only one way to find out. interestingly, and that is to get a mammogram. So in our mammogram reports then, our density category should be spelled out. So our density is in really 4 categories. And the first one is labeled A, and that is called a fatty breast. So that is pretty much no fibroglandular tissue and almost all fat. That's category A. And then it moves on to the different categories A, B, C, and D. So that's how we would find out, is to get a mammogram, and then we either talk to our doctors about the density or we read it in our mammogram reports. And that's the only way to find out.
Okay.
It has nothing to do. A lot of people think, oh, I'm so small, that mammogram is going to see everything because, there's really nothing to look at. Or I'm so large, I must be dense. And all scales and swims are all different, right? We're all, there's no two boobs alike. And so, we're all different. So it really has nothing to do with size, shape, feel, nothing. It's really the only way to tell is on a mammogram report. And it's odd, because you think maybe a bigger breast would be more dense. But actually, some of these, lean women, these, lean, tiny women, they're more dense because they don't have fat on their bodies. Like, they just don't, right?
Okay.
We all know people like that. They're super thin, right? They're super thin. They're very lean. And, they probably do all the right things. They run, they blah, 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 eat right, all that. And lo and behold, they're dense. And so it's difficult to see in a mammogram, and, they turn out to be at higher risk. So, wow, right? That's kind of a counterintuitive thing.
Well, thank you for explaining,
Yeah.
because I really never understood, because I am on the larger side and was told that I'm not dense, and I always was like, well, how can I not be dense when I'm big? So you just really clarified what that means.
It's
so
simply
I'm just fat.
Yeah. Right, exactly. But, since the risk of getting breast cancer is lower the fattier you are, of the fattier the breast, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
So I feel better now.
Right.
Because I never understood that. I said, well, how can I not be dense when I'm so big? I just didn't understand. So you really broke it down.
29% 29% of the breast cancers are in women who are not dense, and 71% are in women who are dense. So it's not to say that a not dense breast or a non-dense breast woman won't get breast cancer, but the likelihood is less. It's all about likelihoods, right? It's all about those percentages.
Okay.
Yeah.
So earlier you were talking about the different categories, and you said one of them is fatty. So what are the other categories?
Right. So if you imagine, kind of a scale from left to right, to not dense at all to all the way dense, there would be about 10% of the people on average are category A, and that's a fatty breast, and that has very little density in it at all. And then 40% will be something called scattered fibroglandular tissue, category B, and that's kind of, a little density, but not very dense, right? And then a lot of people are in category C. That's 40% of the people as well, and they are called heterogeneously dense. And then the remaining 10% are extremely dense. So that's a grand average of kind of everybody, where there's like 10% fatty, 40% scattered, those who are considered not dense. Then the other 50% are considered dense, heterogeneously, and extremely dense. So what's interesting about what I just said is we will see, as lay people, as not doctor people, categories A, B, C, and D. But A, B, and C, and D will never be in your mammogram report. You will you will more likely to hear the words fatty, scattered, heterogeneously, extremely. You're not going to see those A, B, C, D categories because that's not something that doctors use.
Okay, I'm going to go back and check over my reports to see what I can find now.
Everybody who's ever had a mammogram should go back and look at their report and see what it says about density. By law, our density is supposed to be spelled out in our mammogram report, so you should be able to find out. Yeah.
Okay. When we're done, I'm going to go look at my doctor's notes, and I'm going to check it out to see what I am. Every listener to do the same thing that you're going to do when we hang up. Go find out your density. It's really, really critical information. Yep. It's critical. So I know you were mentioning earlier about mammograms are really not really able to detect anything if you are denser. So are there other type of screening options available to us?
There are, and there are getting to be more because of the problem that we just discussed a little bit. And I wouldn't say mammogram doesn't find anything. Mammogram is still, the universal tool. And for those women who are considered not dense, mammogram finds way up in the 95, 98% of all cancers in those breasts. So that's amazing, right?
Yes.
So mammograms are great for that. But when you get into the more dense breasts, it drops off to less than 50%. I think it's more kind of like a third or 40%, honestly.
Well, that's not good.
No, it's not good. And remember, 71% of cancers are in those because of that increased risk that we don't really understand why women with dense breasts are more at risk, but they are. So that's where the problem is. So, everybody's probably heard of a 3D mammogram by now. And that just kind of moves in an arc in front of us and gives lots of images and slices, if you will, that the radiologist can look at different angles of the breast. And it's proven to find, 1 or 2 more cancers per 1,000 women with dense breasts. And it also reduces that pesky callback where a lot of women will get called back. We'd like you to come back in for some more imaging. There's probably nothing wrong, but we want you to come back.
Been there, done that.
Story. Been there, done that. We all have. It feels like. Statistically, that's not really true that we all have, but it feels like it.
Yes.
So, a 3D mammogram is an improvement over a mammogram, but still leaves a lot of cancers out there not found in dense breast tissue. A lot of people think, I got the 3D, I'm all good. And yes, it's better. I don't want to say anything bad about it. It just still leaves a lot not found. So the next thing that could happen is screening ultrasound. And really there's kind of 2 kinds of ultrasound. One is handheld. It's just that handheld wand that kind of we're all familiar with. And they just go over your breast with that and, look. And then there's something called, the nickname is ABUS, but it stands for Automated Breast Ultrasound. And it kind of hovers over our breast and looks at it all at once instead of that handheld wand. They're kind of more or less similar in a find rate, 2 or 3 more per 1,000 women over standard mammography. Getting there, a little bit more, pretty high false positive. You've heard a lot of women say, I got a biopsy and it came back, okay, it wasn't cancer. Woo, right? That's because these modalities see something, but they don't really, you can't really tell sometimes if it's cancer or not. So many, many, many biopsies are done because of that. And many of them come back benign. which is great, but we've done an
Yes.
awful lot of biopsies. Like you really want to theoretically do a biopsy when you know it's cancer, right? Otherwise, you're doing a biopsy when what's the point?
Yeah.
But better safe than sorry, I say. That.
Yes,
I'm
that's
always
true.
about that. I'm all about finding out that it's not cancer than not finding out that it is. If that makes sense.
That's exactly true.
And there's more. There's something called molecular breast imaging that is used at about, 30 or 35 sites around the country. And it finds 250% more cancers in women with dense breasts than mammography.
Really?
That's a huge improvement. And when I found out about that, I was like, oh, my God, that's so exciting. Because there's something that can find all those cancers. But on the other hand, it kind of freaked me out because now I know that all those are left out there not being found.
That's true.
Right? So there are a lot of cancers out there being left to grow to a later stage before they're either felt or they get so large that they're seen on a mammogram or an ultrasound. And by that time, stage 2, stage 3, it's much better to find a cancer at stage 0 or 1. It's just
Definitely.
so much better right? Because, you can get a lumpectomy and a little something, I have a friend who's a doctor, and he says it can be a blip in your life. So blips is what we're looking for, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a stage 3, we're talking chemo, we're talking mastectomy, which can we just call it what it is? It's an amputation. And, losing your hair for a year, big difference.
Yes, definitely big difference.
Right? I know people have lost their businesses, lost their jobs. It's wild, Things happen in your life when it's like that. But the 2-week blip, not so bad. Right? If you have to have cancer, you want to find it early and have it be a blip.
That's why they say detection is key.
Early detection is key to survival. And also, the stage 0 and 1 cancers, their 5-year survival rate is really close to 100%. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
But, the later stage you get, the lower that number goes.
Yeah,
so
that's
true. Why that phrase, that key phrase is out there. Early detection is key to survival because it is. It's always been, So until we find the cure, until we find the real cure for this disease, early detection is the only way out. It's the only way out of this disease. Because once you get to stage 4, where the cancer has left the breast and gone somewhere else, that's you can't cure that. You can't cure that.
Right.
There are better treatments for it, but you can't cure it. So now we were talking about those screening options, and we got off on other things. But that happened.
That's fine. That's fine. That's why it's called Boob Talk. We can be talking about anything.
Yeah. Okay. But let's circle back. I'll finish the original question. So there was that molecular breast imaging that I found out that, when I was at the Mayo Clinic, that they invented there to me, and it kind of started my search of what's really going on here. And, I found out more about additional screening techniques that are emerging. So, the good old-fashioned breast MRI, that's been around for quite some time. It's very expensive.
Yes, I hate that.
It's not really used for screening. It's really used for diagnostic or for people who they know actually have cancer, so they can gather all the information that they can about it. And a breast MRI is probably never going to make it into any screening, massive scale screening for those of us with dense breasts, of which there are millions of us, because it's expensive and it takes a long time to read, etc. So what they have done is they've come up with something called abbreviated MRI, which is kind of like a short MRI, it's faster, there are less images to read. So there are quite a few university and academic settings around the country that are working on that or offering it one way or the other. And the volume's not huge right now, but it's one way to help women with dense breasts, get screened and find all those cancers that are out there. So just to give you an idea, full breast MRI will find on average 16 more cancers than mammography in women with dense breasts. So mammography will find about 3 or 3.5, and a breast MRI will find 16 more. That is scary.
Yeah.
Abbreviated will find about 10 more. So you lose a little bit, I guess, when you go from full-out standard $2,500 job to this abbreviated thing that they're doing now. But still, that's a lot more than a mammogram or a 3D mammogram. And then there's something else called contrast-enhanced mammography, which is kind of a combo between, so they're using a good old-fashioned mammogram with some new software and the contrast that you would use during a CAT scan.
Okay.
That's an exploratory, it's kind of in an exploratory phase right now. They are using it for diagnostic. I don't know if anybody is actually using it for screening right now at all, except perhaps in some sort of trial. So the molecular breast imaging, contrast enhanced, and abbreviated MRI, they will do so much better at finding all the breast cancers that are out there than the things that we're currently using. So I'm excited, and it's scary to me at the same time.
Yes, because it will maybe make you a little bit paranoid.
Yeah.
Worrying about it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we
the numbers
wanted
are
to
the
be
numbers
proactive,
are the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, people are, asking for these tests more as they come to understand what's going on with
Yes, I was going to ask you
and
that.
mammography.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
It's starting to become a thing. Women are starting to say, hey, I know the deal. I know what's going on. Like, I know I have dense breasts, and I know the numbers, and they're not that great. So what else do you have for me? And as more women do that, I think that we will start to get better. And so that's what I encourage women to do, is to first know your density, and if you're dense, talk to your doctor about what else might be out there for you. It might be one of the ultrasounds, which gets you a little bit more. It might be one of these other things that I mentioned. It depends on where you are. It depends on your insurance coverage. It depends on a lot of things.
A lot of things.
Yeah. And there are other factors that would go into a decision of what kind of screening you might get to, like your family history. There are other risk factors. There are other risk factors. So, but it's a conversation. It's a real informed conversation that we really need to start having with our doctors. What our screening plans should be. And
so
for anyone who's got, go ahead.
So if you don't have a density issue, should you be having these additional screenings or just stick with a traditional mammogram?
Well, again, I think the conversation is a good conversation to have with the doctor. So I can't make one blanket statement about that, really, because a woman who doesn't have density might have other risk factors,
True.
that someone might add up to say, well, maybe you should get X. So we really need to be getting away from one size fits all even a large category of people and into what the individual needs. That's the best way to go.
That makes sense.
They're calling it individualized screening or risk-based screening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's where we need to get station about, okay, here's all my factors. Density included, right? Now, here's what your plan ought to be. Yeah.
And,
that would be the best.
Now that you mention that, I know also even in the approach to cancers now, they are trying to cater it to the more individualized approach as to just, one set of drugs fits all type of approach. So this seems to be.
It's kind of the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're studying cancer cells and what the mutations are and all of that, and using that information to figure out how to treat the cancer, not just throw some wild chemotherapy at everybody the same.
Yeah.
Right? So that it's a good analogy what you said there. Yes. Mm-hmm.
You have been listening to part 1 of Does My Density Matter? With special guest Leslie Ferris Yerger, founder of My Density Matters. Stay tuned next time for part 2. You are listening to Boob Talk, and I'm your host, Cynthia Rogers. Remember, never give up hope.